It was a cold evening in a small town on the edge of southern China. The streets were quiet except for the sound of laughter coming from a dimly lit room at the back of an old tea house. Inside, a group of men sat around a wooden table playing cards. The air smelled of smoke and the sound of shuffling cards mixed with bursts of laughter and teasing. Among the players sat Mark Thompson, a man in his mid-30s, tall and confident, with eyes that hid both charm and pride. He was a foreign contractor who had been living in China for several months, working on a construction project. To most people, Mark seemed successful. He had money, friends who loved parties, and a habit of taking risks just to feel alive. He wasn't cruel, but he often laughed at things that should have made him think twice. That night, the game had started friendly, but had slowly turned serious. The bets became larger. Cash filled the table. The men, half drunk on rice wine, began to tease one another about their fortunes. "Luck is everything," one said. "No, skill," shouted another. Mark just smiled, holding his cards with the confidence of a man who thought luck always walked beside him. But then something unexpected happened. One of the players, a local man named Liang, ran out of money. His face was red from frustration. He hated losing, especially to a foreigner. Everyone laughed when he said he had nothing left to bet. "Then fold, Liang," one of them said. "You've got nothing else." But Liang leaned back in his chair and said with a smirk, "Oh, I have something. Something no one else has." The others looked at him with curiosity. He took a slow sip of his drink and added, "A woman. A widow, to be exact. She works for me to pay her late husband's debt. She has 2 little children. She's worth more than money." The laughter stopped. Some of the men looked uncomfortable. "You're joking," someone said. But Liang wasn't smiling anymore. "I'm serious," he said coldly. "She owes me. She's under my control until the debt is paid. If anyone wins this round, I'll give her up." Mark laughed uneasily. "You can't be serious, Liang. That's not a prize." Liang grinned. "What? You afraid of playing for something real?" The word stung Mark's pride. He didn't want to look weak in front of everyone. "Fine," he said, tossing his chips into the center. "Deal the cards." The air turned heavy. The only sound was the shuffling of cards and the ticking of a small wall clock. The game went on for several rounds, the tension building with each move. Finally, after what felt like forever, Mark threw down his hand on a perfect win. The room erupted in cheers and laughter. Liang slapped the table. "Well," he said with a mocking smile, "looks like she's yours now." Mark tried to laugh it off. "Come on, Liang, you're not serious," he said. But Liang only shrugged. "A deal is a deal. You won her fair and square." Mark felt uneasy. It had been a foolish game, just a drunken challenge. He didn't want to be part of something like that. But everyone around him was laughing, and in the noise of their voices, he didn't know what to say. He decided to forget the whole thing, assuming it was just a cruel joke. The next morning, Mark was woken by a soft knock on his apartment door. Still half asleep, he opened it and froze. Standing there was a young woman in simple clothes holding the hands of 2 small children, a boy and a girl, both about 5 years old. The woman bowed her head slightly. "Are you Mr. Thompson?" she asked in a gentle voice. Mark blinked in confusion. "Yes, that's me," he said slowly. The woman gave a small nod. "I was told to come to you. My name is Mei Lin." Mark's heart skipped a beat. The name sounded strangely familiar, though he couldn't place it. He looked at her. She was not beautiful in the usual way, but there was something soft and graceful about her face. Her eyes looked tired, but behind them was quiet strength. Her clothes were old but clean. The twins clung to her dress, their faces shy and innocent. Mark stepped back, feeling awkward. "I think there's been a mistake," he said quickly. "You don't have to be here." She looked confused. "Mr. Liang said you won me," she said simply, her voice calm but heavy. "He told me I now belong to you." Mark's stomach turned. "No," he said firmly. "That was just a game, a stupid game. I don't want anyone to belong to me. Please go home." But Mei Lin only shook her head. "I have no home," she said quietly. "My husband is gone and the place where I lived is not mine. Mr. Liang said I must stay where he orders me to." Mark stood there speechless. The twins looked up at him with wide, uncertain eyes. One of them tugged on his sleeve and whispered, "Mama, I'm hungry." Something inside Mark broke. This wasn't a joke anymore. It was a cruel mess he had somehow become part of. He told them to come in just until he figured things out. He brought them water and some bread. The twins ate quietly, sitting close to their mother. Maylin thanked him politely, never complaining, never asking for more. She sat on the edge of the chair as if she didn't belong anywhere. Mark paced the room, trying to think. "I'll talk to Liang," he said finally. "He can't do this." "I'll make sure he lets you go." But Maylin only gave a small, tired smile. "People like him don't change their minds," she said. "He thinks I am paying for my husband's debt. He said I would never be free." Mark stared at her, guilt rising in his chest. "Your husband, what happened to him?" he asked. Maylin's eyes dropped to her hands. "He worked on a building site," she said softly. "There was an accident. He didn't come home. After that, the company said there was no payment for me, only debt. I have been working ever since." Mark didn't know what to say. Something about her story made his heart ache. He remembered stories of accidents on sites, but they were always just numbers in reports to him, never real people. Now one of those stories was sitting right in front of him. As the day went on, Maylin helped clean the small apartment out of habit. The twins drew pictures on old papers Mark gave them. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was heavy with things that didn't need words. That evening, when Maylin prepared to leave, Mark stopped her. "Please don't go back to Liang tonight," he said. "It's late. You and the kids can sleep here for now. I'll sort this out tomorrow." She hesitated, unsure if she could trust him, but his voice was kind, and for the first time someone had spoken to her like she was human, not a debt. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson," she said quietly. As the night settled in, Mark couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, watching the lights of the town flicker. He could hear the twins breathing softly in the next room and Maylin's gentle hum as she tried to comfort them. The sound stayed with him, calm, steady, almost haunting, and then it hit him again, that strange feeling when she had said her name. Maylin. It stirred something in him, a memory buried deep in his past. He didn't know what it was, but it made his chest tighten. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling, realizing that what had started as a cruel joke had suddenly become something far more serious, something that would change his life forever. The morning sun slipped through the window and fell across the small apartment. Mark woke up early, his mind still restless from the night before. He walked quietly to the living room. Maylin was already awake, sitting by the table with a cup of tea. Her children were still sleeping on the couch, covered with a blanket. She looked peaceful, but her eyes told another story. The story of someone who had lived through too much pain and never complained. "Good morning," Mark said softly. She looked up and gave a polite smile. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. You can call me Mark," he said. She nodded but didn't speak. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was full of unspoken thoughts. Mark wanted to say many things, but he didn't know where to begin. He still couldn't believe what had happened. The game, the cruel bet, the fact that she was sitting there because of something he had done without thinking. He poured himself a cup of tea and sat across from her. "I'll go talk to Liang today," he said firmly. "I'll make sure you're free from this. You shouldn't be forced into anything." Maylin looked at him for a long moment. "I don't think he will let me go," she said quietly. "He doesn't care about right or wrong." Mark sighed. "Then I'll make him care." He spent the rest of the morning trying to find Liang. When he finally did, Liang was sitting outside the same tea house playing cards with other men. Mark walked straight to him. "This has gone too far," he said sharply. "That woman doesn't belong to anyone." "The game was a mistake," Liang laughed. "Mistake? You were happy to win last night. Now you're feeling guilty?" Mark's voice hardened. "I'll pay her debt. Just tell me how much she owes." Liang's grin faded. He leaned forward. "Even if you pay, do you think it changes anything? She'll still be poor. She'll still belong to someone else. That's life here." Mark's hands clenched. "Maybe," he said quietly. "But not if I can help it." He dropped a thick envelope of money on the table and walked away. When he returned to the apartment, Maylin was cleaning. He told her what he had done. For a long time she didn't speak. Then tears slowly filled her eyes. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "I did," he said softly. "It's the least I can do." From that day things began to change. Mark helped Maylene find a small place of her own near the market. He paid the first few months of rent and bought a few things for the children: books, school uniforms, and shoes. At first she refused everything, but he told her gently, "It's not charity. It's a new start." She smiled a little, her first real smile since he met her. "Then thank you," she said. Mark started visiting often. Sometimes he brought food, sometimes toys for the twins, but most of the time he just came to talk. He learned that Maylene loved to cook but rarely had the money for good ingredients. She loved reading old Chinese poetry, even though her life had given her little time for dreams. And she worked harder than anyone he'd ever met, sewing clothes, washing and cleaning to earn whatever she could. The twins, Li Wei and Lian, quickly grew fond of him. They called him Uncle Mark and waited eagerly whenever he visited. Their laughter slowly filled the small home with warmth that even Mark didn't realize he'd been missing. Weeks turned into months. Mark began to change too. He stopped going to the gambling tables. The thrill that once filled his nights now felt meaningless. Instead, he found peace in simple moments, helping Maylene fix a broken chair, reading bedtime stories to the twins, or just sitting on the small balcony watching the sunset with her. One evening, while helping Maylene organize some old boxes, Mark came across a small tin box filled with photographs and papers. He opened it carefully and saw a worn picture inside, a younger Mei Lin standing beside a smiling man in a construction uniform. The man looked familiar. Mark's heart began to race. He picked up the photo and stared at it, trying to remember. "Who is this?" he asked quietly. Mei Lin looked over and smiled sadly. "That's my husband. His name was Zhao Wei. He worked at a construction site in the city. He died in an accident." Mark froze. The name echoed in his head. He whispered almost to himself, "Zhao Wei." She nodded. "Do you know him?" Mark didn't answer right away. Memories began to flood back. The sound of an explosion, the screams, the day years ago when he had been trapped under debris at a construction site. A Chinese worker had pulled him out just seconds before the building gave way. The man's name. Yes, it had been Zhao Wei. He looked at Mei Lin, his voice trembling. "I think your husband saved my life." Mei Lin's eyes widened in surprise. "What?" Mark nodded slowly, his throat tight. "I was there that day. There was an accident. I remember his face now. He pushed me out of the way. He didn't make it out himself." His voice broke. "I never knew his name until now." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The room was quiet except for the sound of the twins laughing faintly in the next room. Mei Lin's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled through them. "Then maybe it wasn't fate that brought you here," she said softly. Maybe it was him. Mark's eyes glistened. He had never believed in destiny before, but now he felt something deep inside him shift. He realized that what had started as a cruel joke had turned into something meaningful, a chance to repay a debt that went beyond money. From that day on, Mark made a promise to himself. He would take care of Maylene and her children as long as they needed him. Not out of guilt, but out of gratitude and respect. He helped her open a small shop near the market where she could sell homemade noodles and tea. The business grew slowly, but it gave her independence and pride. Every morning she worked with quiet joy, and every evening she went home to her children with a smile. Mark stayed nearby, helping whenever he could. The townspeople who once whispered about their strange connection soon began to admire their friendship. Maylin never asked for more than kindness, and Mark never offered more than honesty. One day, as the twins were playing outside, Maylin handed Mark a cup of tea and said softly, "You've done so much for us." "I can never repay you," Mark smiled. "You already have," he said. "You reminded me what life is really about." She looked at him for a moment and then nodded. "Maybe that's what my husband wanted, for you to find peace too." He didn't answer, but he knew she was right. Years later, when people in the town spoke about them, they didn't talk about the poker game or the joke that started it all. They spoke about how a man found redemption through kindness and how a widow found hope again. Mark often said to anyone who asked, "Sometimes, life gives you a second chance, but it comes in the most unexpected way." Every time he saw the twins laugh or watched Maylin serve tea in her little shop, he silently thanked Zhao Wei, the man who had once saved his life and, in a strange way, saved it again through his family. And though their story began as something dark and cruel, It ended as something pure and beautiful, a story of forgiveness, fate, and the quiet power of doing what's right.